All right, so Connext is out with an update today. So they said earlier this year, we announced the Amarok network upgrade to overcome limitations in Connext V1. It introduces support for arbitrary message passing, enabling developers to integrate easily into our network to build fully expressive cross-chain applications. The upgrade modularizes the bridging stack. Instead of one system powering all the functionalities, developers instead call into a single function that splits actions between a liquidity layer, which is Connext, and a messaging layer. After intensive research into the trade-offs of bridge security models, we chose to partner closely with Nomad. The team then invented the optimistic bridge model, a messaging system that relays data across chains using fraud proofs similar to optimistic rollups. And that was the bridge that actually, I believe, got hacked the other day. Yeah, it was. There was a Nomad bridge there, but Connext is still working with them, and they still believe that Nomad is one of the strongest, one of the best teams in the bridge space, but it will take time for Nomad to recover funds and restart its system, and the Connext team obviously cannot afford to wait for this to happen, as they have 150 routers, over a dozen dApp teams, and tens of thousands of users waiting for the Amarok upgrade to go live. And they say here, fortunately, we were able to come up with an alternative approach that only modestly extends our timeline. Pending audits, Amarok will temporarily utilize existing AMBs for rollups and sidechains to relay messages and a series of connectors to plug into those. So if you're wondering what happened to the Amarok upgrade, this is why it hasn't gone live yet, or at least one of the reasons, probably the major reason why it hasn't gone live yet, that Nomad hack. But seems Connext has navigated around this and is going to be putting this upgrade live sooner rather than later, and it's designed to be a temporary solution, obviously, there. Now, bridges haven't been a topic of discussion lately as much, I think, obviously, because it's been overshadowed by the OFAC and censorship stuff generally, but building secure, decentralized, censorship-resistant bridges is still a very difficult task. And I've seen people shame bridges for being hacked, and I don't think that's the right approach here. Obviously, I've gone on about it on the Refuel a lot, how a lot of these bridges are inherently insecure. A lot of them increase a lot of extra risk if you're, depending on where you're bridging to. And even the, I guess, layer 2 bridges, even the native ones, have their own risks associated with them. Like, for example, they're centralized. Like, that is a huge risk. So when looking at bridges just generally, I think instead of attacking the bridge and making fun of the bridge and everything like that, it's probably better to focus on which bridges are kind of taking security as seriously as possible, not laughing at people that suggest bugs or suggest edits to the bridge. There have been teams that have done this in the past, which has kind of annoyed me because there's a lot of value locked in these things. And also just realizing that no matter what you do on Ethereum or any chain out there, there is always a possibility of bugs. Even on Bitcoin, like the Bitcoin code base, yes, has been tested, battle hard, and there's a huge bug bounty on it to exploit it. But it doesn't mean bugs can't exist or can't be introduced either. So you always have to be vigilant of that sort of stuff, and you always have to realize that your risk goes up exponentially as soon as you interact with certain contracts. And it can go up even just a lot interacting with the trusted contracts. And it's not just risk of hack, but it's also economic risk. For example, this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. If you're becoming a Uniswap liquidity provider, just as an example, when you do that, you have to account for not only the fact that there could be a bug in there, that should be part of your risk profile, but you should also account for the fact that you're taking on the risk of impermanent loss. Now, impermanent loss is probably the worst term that this industry has ever invented, because a lot of the time it's not impermanent. But what I mean is that you should be aware of the fact that you may not, and a lot of the times, get out what you put in. The fact of the matter is, if you LP on an ETH USDC LP, for example, and the fee revenue doesn't make up for the movement in price, you may have just been better off holding ETH in that scenario. Obviously, with Uniswap v3, it becomes more complex, where you can move your liquidity around, and it becomes a more of an optimized game there. But there is always economic risks here, and even putting money into lending markets. If you put a piece of collateral into a lending market, and then the borrow rate is at 100% of that collateral, it means that there's none of that collateral left in the protocol, and it means you have to wait to withdraw your collateral. So for example, just as an easy example, if you put ETH into a money market and 100% of that ETH has been borrowed from the money market, and there's no ETH in there, then you wouldn't be able to withdraw your ETH even if you paid down your debt. There are different ways around this with, I guess, withdrawing different assets and stuff like that, but it all introduces more risk. So you need to be aware of those risks when interacting with things, not just smart contract risk, but economical risk as well. Because I see plenty of people, especially on Twitter, they're so confused why they've provided liquidity on Uniswap or provided liquidity on another AMM, and they've actually ended up with less ETH than they put in. It's like, well, because the fact is the market moved against you. It's as simple as that. Like, just because it's automated doesn't mean it doesn't still suffer from the same perils of just general market making. Market making is not a free lunch. It's definitely very specialized, especially when it comes to V3 and moving your position around and concentrating your liquidity. So it's good to be aware of that. But maybe I got a little bit off track there, but I think bridges fall into the same kind of vein here, but also I think you have to be pragmatic too, and I'm glad Connext is being pragmatic instead of just waiting for the Nomad kind of hole to be filled and the Nomad team to rectify everything. They're marching ahead with the upgrade that they want to put live, which I think is the correct thing to do. But I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can read their full thread, and I believe there's a blog post attached to it as well.